My dad said we never had an attic, but I knew he was lying. It all started in 2012, following my 5-year-old brother's death. Grief made itself at home in the deep wound left by the loss of our mother only 3 years earlier. I lost her at the age of 6, lost my brother at the age of 9. I was too young to endure such agony. And again, I don't know whether anybody would be able to bear the things I've seen and felt. After Eric passed, it was just Dad and me, but I felt in a way as if I'd buried my father too, or at least buried the version of him I'd once known, as Eric's funeral seemed to break him. In fairness, my father had always been inward and reclusive, but he became worse after my brother died. Some years he'd leave my dinner on the table, and I wouldn't see him until the morning. "I miss Eric," I tearfully confessed one evening, and Dad simply replied, "We need to move on, Lorna." Maybe that would have been easier if I hadn't felt so isolated. Knowing what I know now, however, I wonder whether I should be thankful. I was a meek child, and trauma would make me a meeker adult. The meek go unnoticed, and that may well have saved me. At some point in late 2012, I spent the weekend with my grandparents, and when I returned home, I immediately noticed quite a pronounced difference in the house. "Where is it?" I asked, as I lugged my suitcase across the upstairs landing. "Where's what?" my dad asked in a flat tone. I nodded my head at the white plaster on the ceiling above. "The attic door." He frowned. "We don't have an attic, Lorna." I rolled my eyes. "Very funny, Dad. What's between the ceiling and the roof, then?" "That space is structural," my father said softly. "It isn't accessible." That made no sense to me at the time, but I was young. Too young to question my parents' supposed wisdom. Of course I knew the attic door had existed, but I assumed Dad to be playing a practical joke. And that filled me with hope. Hope that, for the first time in many months, his sense of humour may have returned. Years went by, and the attic door remained only in my assured memory. I began to feel quite uneasy. Hated walking underneath that ceiling and seeing only white rather than the wooden door which had been there for 9 years of my life. Maybe I would have eventually got over it. Would have come to believe that I'd simply misremembered my childhood if it hadn't been for my dad's conviction that I'd lost my mind. A strange, abrasive conviction. He always seemed to be on the verge of losing his patience with me. Time and time again he would tell me there had been no attic. He promised that there had never been anything but foam, wood, and wiring chases in the space between the second floor ceiling and the property's sloping roof above. There was no space for a proper attic, according to him. By the time I entered my teenage years, I had long stopped asking about the loft space from my childhood. Stopped caring, truth be told. I buried myself in school, college, and university. All the while I drifted farther and farther from my dad, and that came down to more than the ceiling. Our relationship had been growing more and more strained as the years went by, and the same was true of every relationship my father formed. He broke up with Jenna just before last Christmas, which turned him cold and standoffish. I'd never liked him in that state, and admittedly I missed Jenna. She'd been somewhat of a warm, comforting presence in the house for the past 4 years. Almost a stepmother to me. In spite of these many red flags, however, the first alarm bell only started ringing this morning, around 3 o'clock. A few hours before I needed to get up for work, I was woken by a series of noises. They came from above. 3 weighty, board-buckling creaks. It wasn't the sound of the ceiling settling. Wasn't the sound of rats burrowing through those supposed wiring chases in the inaccessible loft space. Rather, it was sound that confirmed what I'd always known. There was an attic above me, and something was moving around in it. But I didn't call out, didn't investigate. Instead, I clung to the edge of my sweaty duvet and lay silently, swallowing the shriek that sought to escape. I had mastered the art of burying fear. Part of me knew that to call out would be a very, very unwise idea. The part of me that has been suppressing things since I was old enough to remember them. The things that happened even whilst Eric and Mum were alive. I remember the set of eyeballs that would watch me from the crack in my ajar bedroom door. Sometimes I would wake during the night and see those eyes disappear into the black. I remember the time Dad stood and watched as I, barely more than a toddler, flailed helplessly in a swimming pool. I'm sure I've forgotten worse things, but I'll never forget what I saw this morning. This morning, something possessed me. Some new source of courage, or more likely, delirium. My dad went to work, and I had time before my shift, so I went into the garage, fetched a sizable hammer, and returned to the upstairs landing. I took to the ceiling with a series of swings, and tore a hole through the white plaster with alarming ease. At first I thought I'd underestimated my own strength, but then I realised there'd been next to nothing in the form of resistance from the ceiling. Nothing to prevent my remodelling project. I spat plaster and dust from my wide mouth. Then I eyeballed the black abyss above me. I knew it. I'd known it for 13 years. The space above the upstairs landing wasn't filled with piles of foam and wooden beams and wires. It was a black void. There was, and always had been, a room up there. An attic. Part of me wants to end here, but I'm currently sitting in a police station trying to keep my mind off everything. So I'm going to tell you what I told the officers. I set up a ladder on the landing, climbed into the attic, then lit the space with my phone torch. Now, I don't know how the loft used to look. After all, I hardly had reason to go up there as a 9-year-old. However, what purpose it once served, it serves a new one now. I hurled my guts across the floorboards when my light caught the first of the bodies. A woman was bundled up in a large translucent plastic bag. A maggot-filled bag. The remaining flesh of her bloody face was peeling away to reveal a broad-mouthed skull. But enough features remained to identify her. It was Jenna, my stepmother. As I moved the torch beam, I nearly lost my footing on the ladder. I wasn't horrified by the sight of Jenna, not even by the sight of the many other plastic-wrapped corpses, some little more than ashes in tattered clothes. No, I wobbled in fear when I saw the shrine, for lack of a better word, near the back of the attic. Surrounded by fresh burning candles were 2 long, rectangular wooden crates. Crates with what seemed to be sturdy lids and brass clasps. Of course, these were no crates. I know that. About half an hour ago, an officer informed me that my father hadn't returned home. They haven't found him. Sooner or later I have to leave this station, but I don't want to do that. I'm terrified. I should feel safe, apparently. The police officers have promised to get me far away from here. They've promised to watch me, to protect me. They've promised not to let me out of their sight. How on earth will they keep that promise? Nobody has ever stopped my father from making things disappear before.